All right, here we are with another great episode of Front of the Class. We've got a real educator here today, Dana Watts. And Dana, to those in the educational world, how do you introduce yourself with what you're doing these days and what your background has been in this profession? How do you like to get past that original high and introduce yourself with a little more background on what you do and what you're working on?
Well, someone once described me as a Ph.D. and curriculum addict, and I think that's a good way to describe kind of what I do. I live in the world of professional development and training teachers and working with teachers and empowering schools to be better is the heart and soul of kind of what I do. I work for International School Services, and I've been here for about 6+ years. But prior to that, I spent my entire career working internationally and working within our schools, mostly in Asia. And I just have a passion for teaching and making sure that everyone in the building at a school has access to learning so they can be their best selves when they're working with students.
Fantastic. And what is something that maybe you're working on right now, say over the next 3 to 6 months, with your teachers or certain schools or certain places? Like what's maybe something that people could listen to and say like, oh, what's Dana working on over the next 3 to 6 months? Like what's something that you have cooking that maybe is new or something that you've been doing for a long time that you're working on over that time frame?
Well, so right now, my passion project came from my dissertation for my doctorate, and I looked at professional development within international schools and how do we provide equity and access to all schools. I was quite lucky while I worked overseas. I worked at some very well-resourced schools. So we had, high-end consultants and authors and researchers coming into our schools and doing professional development. But not every school has access to that, and not everyone at a school has access to that. So basically, my passion project has been really developing Netflix for schools, where you have similar to how you might want to watch 10 episodes of Friends because there's just some comfort in that, right? So we have courses that are always available on demand, and you can watch them whenever you want. But then each month we have kind of the Emily in Paris or The Bear, like the new episodes that are coming out, so that there's always something fresh and new, and people have an opportunity to engage with different consultants around the world. And so, but a big aspect of what we have tried to develop is to make sure that everyone at a school has access. So from our security guards to food service to our nurses to finance, HR, admissions, and our TAs and our school leaders and board members and, of course, always our educators. But unless we're truly inclusive learning communities, then or at least that's my goal, is to make truly inclusive learning communities for everyone.
Perfect. So trying to help those who maybe don't have the best resources at their particular school, maybe they're more remote, whatever it may be, still have the access to great mentorship, how I did this, all those types of things that they might not have access to. So let's get them access. Any favorite any favorite that you have or most popular from the audience of those professional development, those episodes, or like what are the problems that teachers are trying to solve? Like what are some of the top and most important how-tos, or how do I do this? How do I execute this? How do I do something? What are some of those popular learnings that people take from you, and or some of the ones that you're most proud of creating?
Well, we actually just ran one a half hour ago on, we just wrapped up the first of a series on safeguarding and how do we help protect and safeguard not just the students, but also the adults in our building and our community and the parents within our school community. How do we help them transition from one place to another? How do we help with loss within the international school community? But safeguarding is, I think, the social, emotional health and well-being of just society in general right now is a big conversation within our schools. As far as being proud of different ones, we have quite a few. Anything we do with AI just goes through the roof. We've done a lot of things on standards-based grading and reporting. We did a bunch with Ken O'Connor and Damian Cooper, and on standards-based grading and reporting and assessment, and how do we align our practices, which I think are fabulous. And then they brought me in to look at what does that actually look like in practice in a school. So going from the theoretical to hands-on, what does it look like as an English teacher? What might my rubric look like, and things like that. But in a very practical sense, this kind of came about from, I was originally in higher ed. And when I first started teaching internationally, they asked me to teach IB. Not a big problem, pretty easy crossover. Then they had asked me a year or two later to step in for a middle school teacher to teach humanities. There is a massive shift in between a college-age student and a middle school student. But the last thing I wanted to do was go to my principal and say, hey, I have horrible classroom management skills. I don't know what to do with middle schoolers. And so we need to make sure that teachers have the autonomy and voice and choice to be able to take professional development at that moment when they know they need it. And so like one of the courses that we have is all on classroom management. And like and when you need that, you need it. And you certainly don't want to be told by somebody else that you're not good at it. And so, but you need to be able to have access to that at the right moment. And you never know when you're going to need that, right? Or you could just have a student that you just can't seem to get through to. And so there's always things that come up with teaching and learning that you're not sure until the moment that you need it. And then you're like, whoa, okay, I need to learn this. So being able to have access to that learning, I think, is really important. So we also are always trying to develop courses along those lines as well, so that we're meeting the needs of across the board.
I've got to dig in on this one just for a little bit of this transition from higher ed to middle school. And it sounds like, from what I thought I heard there, you're feeling a little bit lost at this point. Like, whoa, a 13-year-older is very different than a 19-year-old in terms of how I'm supposed to run this day. Can you just put us back into that realm of when you were there, and a little bit of, maybe your first day, first week, first month of like, what's going through your head? What are some of the things you're trying to accomplish? Are they failing miserably? Are you having some success? What are you ultimately also for those listening of how to maybe get administrators and other people on your side? Is it's one thing, like you said, to just, I'm lost. What do I do? It's another thing entirely to like, all right, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've watched this video, I've applied this seems to be working and this isn't. Like, how else can you guide me to help be better manage the classroom, right? It's totally different things than when you just blindly ask for help versus when you're trying things, showcasing what's working, what's not, and then asking for additional help. So can you put us a little bit into how are you feeling? What are you trying? And when do you finally feel confident to go ask for certain help after you've maybe tried some things? Can you just shed a little bit of light on this so that if there's someone going through that right now, they might be able to follow your path?
Well, I think that I remember clearly the day that I realized I had terrible middle school classroom management skills, because I had been teaching in the middle school for a couple of weeks, and I just was having trouble jiving with like nothing was connecting really well with the students. And there was something massive happening in the world. I can't remember what it was exactly, but I had a student in class just complaining about how someone had done something in the hallway and had ignored them or something else. And it was the world's worst tragedy ever. And I said, let's step out in the hall. Let's have a little chat. And so the student is having some sort of emotional, breakdown and in my mind, overreacting to whatever this was. And I looked at the student and I said, are you serious? Literally, you need a bigger view on the world. And I think there had been a bombing or there had been something big. And I'm like, people died today. I'm like, there's bigger things in the world. And I saw another middle school teacher walk by me and look at me like, how did you just say that to a 12-year-old? What are you thinking? And like, I just realized I have I have no concept of what's going through this kid's head. And at that point, my kids were still little. They were, not even in preschool or elementary. And I was just like, whoa. And luckily, this other teacher walking by made me realize how out of context I was. And the student was very much living what their lived reality. And I was like, whoa, I have a lot to learn. So I literally went right to, after class was over, I went to one of the counselor's offices, and I was like, okay, I need information on how the middle school brain works, how they process information and emotions and regulate their emotions. Like, I think I'm really struggling with this because I'm expecting them to react in a different way than they are. And she was like, yeah, you might need, there's going to be a big difference here, Dana, and you've got a learning curve. So she actually, one of the things she suggested that I do is start doing a lot more discussion groups within my classroom, but also to start working at some clubs after school and getting to understand them outside of a academic context and more in their social environments and seeing how they interact and work together. And then she had me, there were a couple books, I'm not remembering the name of the author at the moment, but the author was huge into teaching middle schoolers. And so she helped me go to the curriculum office, get some books. I started reading and learning more about middle schoolers and found out that I absolutely loved teaching middle schoolers. But in the beginning, I was intimidated and overwhelmed by them because I did not understand their headspace and where they were coming from.
100%. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I find this a fascinating question of like, if that same thing were to happen to you today, after being around middle schools for so much longer, having just more assets at your disposal of how to handle a situation like that, like what might you do differently today? Or what might you advise someone who's coming to your office or coming to your professional development training who's like, I've got this kid who's just complaining every day about these little ticky-tacky things. Like, how do I get them past this? Like, what might you do differently, or what might you advise someone for how to handle something like that today?
Well, I would still potentially look at who the counselors are in your building, because they understand these students more than anyone, and they're an untapped resource often. Teachers don't always, they think of the counselors being there for the students, but the fact that they know so much about the students, they're actually a great resource for the teachers. But I think also there's a lot of work that's been done over the past few years on third culture kids and understanding what a TCK is within the context of international schools. I would probably do some research into that and try to learn more about, students in that capacity. But I don't know if I would do that much that's that different. I probably would have asked for help a lot sooner and realized that I think often teachers think that they're supposed to know everything, and it's okay to say that you don't. I probably also would have gone to my principal and admitted that I needed some help on just learning more about students in that age group. Because just because I knew how to teach college and high school did not mean I knew how to teach in middle school in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a powerful lesson there of maybe we need to unlearn what worked there doesn't necessarily work here, and we might have to actually go unlearn some things that we learned before because they don't work in this new context. On that note, so teaching internationally, I'm curious to dig into how teachers who are maybe going through that experience for the first time can set themselves up for success. So how do you see, as an example, there's setting themselves up for success can be how to manage the classroom, how to work with other teachers, how to work with parents, also how to work with the administration at your school. I'm curious for how do you see people who are maybe new to their international experience? Maybe it's their first time teaching internationally. How can they work with the administration to really be on the same page to set the teacher up for success and really understand, how they ask for help, when they ask for help, like what they should do first, what things they should try to handle versus what things they should. I mean, there's a million questions a teacher might have, right? But how do they work with the administration to really get on a good foundation to set themselves up for success in, say, their first year teaching at an international school?
I think if I was brand new to teaching internationally, it's important to know that there's almost that you now have a direct line to all the senior administrators. So in the past, I've taught in schools where the principal doesn't step into my classroom the entire time I'm there. And you don't necessarily know the head of school. You don't necessarily know the director of teaching and learning. In an international school, you know them incredibly well, and they're there to help you. So there's this open communication, and they really, so that makes that whole transaction a little less, sorry, it doesn't feel as formal, which is really, really nice. But I think learning about the culture and country and students that are in front of you is probably the most important thing you can do. And understanding that these students came from various backgrounds and different places and have had experiences that are unlike anything you're going to get when they're all from one country or from one region of the world. And so a perfect example in that humanities class, I was asked to teach World War II. I thought, okay, easy. I can teach World War II.
And real quick, sorry, can you share a little bit on that World War II of like what country were you teaching in, and what was the makeup maybe of the nationalities of the students in your class, just for a little context before you start to figure out how do I teach this subject?
Yeah. So I was teaching actually in India, and I was teaching World War II and at the American Embassy School in New Delhi. And we had over 46 different countries represented within our school. We are at the heart of the diplomatic area and basically the main international school in the city. And so I'm looking out on my classroom, and I have a student from Germany, this sweet, wonderful young woman who is just quiet and shy, but wonderful student. I have quite a number of students from Japan. I have one student who spent a lot of his life in Russia at the American Embassy in Russia. I have students from England. I have a bunch of Americans. And I realized that I've got basically all the major players from World War II sitting in front of me. And
not on the same side either. You've got people who are fighting against each other. Yeah.
And my student, and actually the way I realized it was my student from Germany came to me and she said, I don't want everyone to think I'm Hitler. And she said, and she was just so quiet and introverted, and she was really nervous that she was going to be perceived in a way full of hatred and things of that nature in the classroom. And I realized there's lots of different perspectives within that classroom. And one of my students, we started talking about what they knew already about World War II. And it was amazing. So one of my students from Japan brought up that her grandmother had survived Hiroshima. And I thought, wow, this is a learning opportunity that I would never have if I was teaching I was originally from Buffalo, New York. I'm not going to have necessarily potentially that same opportunity. So I asked her, I said, do you think your grandmother would be willing to talk to us about this? And it was in the days of Skype, pre-Zoom. And her grandmother agreed and ended up Skyping in with the students to talk about the bombing of Hiroshima. Wow. And so really being able to look at all those different perspectives in the classroom made me such a stronger teacher, made me really look at all the different viewpoints. And another example in that same year was I was teaching about what I thought was the Vietnam War, but I have students from Vietnam who called it the American invasion. And I had always learned from a very U.S. lens of what that war was about, but then having students from Vietnam who saw it in a different light, and really being able to talk to them about what happened and things that happened within their country, and then pulling in literature from people from Vietnam and being able to read some of that, and having different book groups and things of that nature about what was happening during that time period was eye-opening to me as a teacher. And I learned just as much from my students as I'm sure I learned more from them than they learned from me. I was amazed at how much my lens of looking at the world and how much there is that you can bring into your classroom just through the students. And another quick story is I totally stole this from my friend Dave Crocker years and years ago, back when I was in Bangkok, but he did this book, I got almost like a choice for an independent reading project every year called Parents' Choice. So at back to school night, he would give the parents a sheet of paper that said, at some point throughout the year, as an independent book read, you get to choose the book your child's going to read. They have to choose, you can choose any book from when you were their age that had an impact on you. And the student is going to interview you and ask you what you got out of the book. Then they're going to read it, and then they're going to write a letter back to you, and then they're going to give me a copy explaining what they got out of the book. I learned it didn't have to be in English. It could be in whatever language was appropriate for the family. That parents introduced me to literature from across the world. And I have done that now from as young as 6th grade all the way through, and I still have taught higher ed courses. And I love having my parents be able to tell me about rich literature from around the world and voices and stories that I didn't know because it wasn't brought up in the canon of my English lit background.
That's incredible. So I'm just curious on that one real quick. Did any parents ever push back? Like, no, I don't want to do that.
Only one. And it was parents from the U.S. Embassy, and they were not big readers, and so they said, "Well, we don't really read, and we don't have any books that we want to recommend to our daughter." And I said, "Okay, how about a poem?" And they said, "Nope, we hate poetry. If we don't like books, we don't like poetry." I was like, "Okay." It's like, how about a song that really resonated with you, and we'll have your daughter look at the words and figure that and take that piece. And so they were able to find a song that really meant something to them. It was a Bob Dylan song, which was great because there's great literature and great writing in a lot of Bob Dylan's work. And then we talked about that, and then the student talked about what that meant, about what mattered to her parents. And so, but that was the only time I ever had parent pushback.
And by the way, I love how you offered multiple other suggestions of how to engage by something that they might like better than a book. And for those listening, right, like part of the value of the thing that I love about doing these podcasts is hearing some of the things that are just unique to a teacher here, tried this, they tried this didn't work, they tried this, and then they started doing it every year because it was just something that was really impactful. So if I could, feel free to steal that, everybody. That sounds like a very useful, whether you're teaching internationally or not, right? And again, if there's pushback, you can push on, well, what about a poem? What about a song? What about a movie? What about an event? There's a million different things that you could translate that to, but that's just an incredibly powerful way of, having the parents have a little bit more hands-on of the educational experience only one time through the year. You're not asking for something every week. It's one time through the year, right? Bring them some hands-on experience. And then, my gosh, what a learning all the kids can have of the other students and where they're coming from and what's important to their parents and to you also. If you do that early in the year, that might impact how you tweak kind of teaching certain students. So thank you for sharing that. And all those listening, feel free to steal that. That's a great example of something you can do in the classroom.
One thing we would do too is then do a book talk at the end of the year about the books our parents recommended, and having kids talk about whether they liked their parents' book or not, but having another kid recommend a book like, "Oh, I didn't want to read this. My parents made me read it." And then they were like, "Oh, it's so good. And I didn't realize that they cared about this," and blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden now the other kids are like, "Oh, well, this kid said that this was a good book. So now I'm going to go and read it." And so it really opened up the conversations about literature in a really fun way.
Thank you for sharing that. And one thing, just because I've never heard this story, and I probably will never hear it again, so I got to go back to this. Like when you get the little girl's grandma on the phone who survived the bombings in Japan, like, can you share a little bit more of just like, how did that sound? How did the class react? How did you react? Like, that's a very unique experience that I've never heard anyone that I know ever be able to experience. So can you just help us understand what that phone conversation looked like, felt like, changed perspective? Like, did the class discussion, like, was there a different discussion in the class that day? Did you have some feeling? Like, what happened? Like, that's just such a unique experience. Can you just share a little bit more about that day?
Yeah, I think, well, the grandmother was really cognizant that she was talking to middle school children, but she was also really pretty graphic, and she got teared up and was quite emotional in talking about it, which I think made the war not sound like something boring that you were, not that I want it to not be boring, but like, or whatever. But it made it so real. It came off the paper, and they realized how it affected generations. And then the students became really interested in what happened after the bombings, what happened after what's it like now? What did they want to learn? And what was somewhat amazing is a little bit after that, it might have been 2-3 months after that, there was the massive tsunami that hit Japan. And we, and my students went above and beyond to do anything they could. They started all these fundraisers at our school for students in Japan who had lost their school and had lost family members and things of that. Like, it felt like there was such a connection of my classroom to anything and everything that was happening in Japan. And we ran fundraisers throughout the school, and we were sending supplies and doing all these things. And I don't know if the grandmother hadn't shared her life story with us, if my students would have felt such a connection to such a huge, massive current event that was happening in the world. And it just made the world smaller. And I think that's important, because it's easy to see, in today's context, what's happening in the Middle East, or what's happening, or even everything that just happened in Afghanistan in the past couple of days. Like, you read about it, but then the reality of when you feel like you know somebody there who is going through it, and it just, then you're going to care a lot more.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That had to be an incredible day, maybe an incredible week in the classroom of an experience that everyone in the education system's read about, but no one's ever heard that voice talk about what it was actually like. So thank you for sharing that. So those are a couple of very interesting and very fruitful projects, right? Engaging the parents on your favorite book, et cetera. I am curious to dig in a little bit on some tough days, especially when teaching internationally. If people, or it could be a new school, it could be your first year, it could be any of those things to apply to other teachers who maybe aren't teaching internationally. But when there's those down days, hard weeks, you're just not getting through to this student or maybe this classroom. You feel like your classroom management's not there. When there's those tough times that teachers inevitably face, right? What are some strategies that you've seen people employ to get their energy back, to take control? You alluded to asking for help sooner in the process. How do people go about getting their groove back, right, so to speak, when there's that down day, down week, down month, whatever it might be? Like, what are some things you've done, and what are some things that you have seen others do when they're facing those tough times in the classroom, and how do they bounce back?
Well, I think for a lot of people, I don't think I always react the same way other people do. So, I mean, I will, making sure you have some balance is really important, and you're taking care of yourself. You're taking care of your own personal exercise, eating right, sleeping right. I am terrible at all of those things. I'm just going to own that. I don't sleep well. Or long. And so I kind of dive in deeper when I feel like I'm losing touch. So for instance, if I feel like I'm not connecting with students or I'm losing my love of teaching, I will dive deeper in with students and I will find more clubs, more organizations, more ways, go to a chaperone a school dance, volunteer at, whatever happens to be going on that weekend or whatever at the school to remember why I love it. I don't think that is necessarily a strategy that works for everyone else, but I become energized by students. And when I see them, sometimes I need to see them out of the context of a student and watch them just be a child and engaging with other kids and see that human aspect that makes me fall in love with them. And another quick story that I just thought of from when I also was in Delhi is there were a lot of students who I had pushback from the school community that we had a gaming club. And I created this gaming club for kids to go and game. Like, Dana, why would you ever create that? Like, who needs to game more? And I said, I just need you to come and see what happens in this group. And people think of gamers like, oh, they're being quiet and they're like tapping away at their computer at home and that's it.
Yeah, the stereotype, it's some kind of mindless activity until maybe you see the interaction and yeah, go ahead. What did you see? What did they see?
Oh my gosh, my gaming club. So I had a teacher who was totally against gaming walk into my club, and it was the loudest group of students you could imagine. They're all talking to each other. The energy in the room was off the charts. They're not just sitting there with headphones on, not talking to each other. It was, the volume was a little too loud, but it's so fun and exciting. And he looked at me and he's like, these are the kids who don't talk in my classroom. These are the kids who I can't get to speak. He's like, this is their language. This is where they show their true selves. So he literally started coming every week and gaming with the kids so he could get to know the students he wasn't connecting with. And so I think sometimes you have to do I don't know. For me, I like to immerse myself more because it reminds me of what I should be doing and why I love it. For other people, sometimes it's stepping back and it is taking time and making sure that if that you're giving yourself time and energy for yourself. For me, I do the opposite.
Go all in, develop those relationships, care that deeply, and then all of a sudden that they're mean to me in the classroom doesn't sound as bad when you've got a deeper relationship with that person or those students in that class, and now you're kind of on the same team of trying to solve it instead of it feeling more why don't there's so many bad things in the world, just get past it, right? Like when you have that deeper relationship, it's easier to have that empathy, I guess. So thank you for sharing that. And on the note of, again, some wild experiences you've had, the gaming club and then the grandma who survived the Hiroshima bomb, or one of the two, I can't remember which city he said, in Japan in World War II. Wild stories. Do you have any that rise to the surface that we can laugh at? Any fun, crazy, maybe again, especially teaching internationally, sometimes there's some language barriers. People say one thing in British English and it means something different in American English. And then all of a sudden that can create some hilarity. Like any examples of some just fun, wild, funny, enjoyable, energizing experiences that you can share in your classroom experience over all these years that hopefully can get a nice laugh out of the audience out here?
I'm trying to think of something funny because I must have like hundreds of them. No, okay, the only thing that's coming to my mind right now is, I did have a kid sink in quicksand, but it was quite funny now that he survived. So I took students, we were whitewater rafting in the Ganges, and I had, middle school kids that either have hit puberty or they haven't. So we had been waiting for my friend who was behind us. And so we pulled over on the side of the river so the kids could get out while we were waiting for the last boat, because we were the last two boats of a group of boats that were whitewater rafting. And so my students were jumping on the sand, and we had this great river guide who was from Nepal, but he was little. He was the size of my students. So they're all bouncing. And then I had three boys who were kind of all standing together. And they were kind of in a line, and I saw my other colleague coming down the river, and I was like, okay, let's get back in the boat. Well, the two kids on the outside were big. They had hit puberty. The middle one hadn't yet, right? So when the two bigger kids moved, the smaller kid sank. And I thought he was like playing around. I was like, come on, get out of the sand. Like, we got to go. And he's like, I can't. And so long story short, he actually had fallen into a quicksand hole, which I thought only existed in Roadrunner and Wild Coyote.
Yeah,
thing.
I remember hearing about that all the time as a kid. I've never actually seen it happen.
Yeah, I didn't know. And I guess that's because the river bed was quite low then, the sand was really bouncy because there was quicksand in there, and we didn't realize it. And so when the big kids moved, it created this vacuum for the younger kid, the smaller kid, and he just sank.
And like, how far down was he? Was he like down to his knees, waist?
He went down to his knees. It took us, this part's not funny. It took us 45 minutes to get him out. We got him out. No problem. I mean, not no problem. It was scary at the moment, but it was incredible. And that night, they had all the river guides up and down the river come back to the camp where we were sleeping to talk about the ways that we got him out. But like, how many kids can say they sank in quicksand and then they got dug out? I mean, it's pretty incredible. Like, the stories that you end up experiencing overseas, like, people think you're making this stuff up, and you're like, no, that's what happened on the school trip. It's not the school trip and you got lost and you ended up in the wrong part of the museum. Like, oh no, I sank in quicksand and my teacher dug me out.
Well, if there's ever an opportunity to go back and remember more of those, maybe there's a chance for us to do another episode that is just all of the wild, crazy, fun, scary, enjoyable, wild experiences that you've had in this international teaching world. Because if you said there's hundreds, that's the first one you thought of. Like, I want more as an episode 2, if we can ever do that. One more thing, just to wrap up, kind of approaching a school year kind of holistically, and then I'd love to get into some more quick hitter questions for you. But when you or others are kind of facing, it's the end of the year, end of a school year, there's all kinds of metrics and things that maybe the school or tests or whatever it is judge performance of a teacher. But how do you judge for yourself? Like, internally, like when you're at facing the end of a year, what maybe are some of the questions you ask yourself? What are some of the ways that you determine this was a really good year because of X, Y, or Z, or maybe I could have been a little better. I'm going to try these things next year. Like, how do you go about that process for yourself? Maybe what are some questions that you ask yourself, and how ultimately at the end of the year are you satisfied or less satisfied, or how do you get to some sense of like, how did I do this year? How do you do that for yourself?
So I once had someone tell me that it's one of the nicest compliments anyone ever gave me, that I reminded them of George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. As a teacher, like, did you make a difference in the life of a child? And so at the end of the year, I try to think about like the kids who, like, I think I went into education because I wanted to be the adult that I most needed as a kid. And I try to think about my students on who most needs me that year, and did I actually reach them? And I love to have my favorite student, I know you're not supposed to have one, but you always do, is the kid who least wants to learn, who does not want to take my class, who hates whatever subject it is or hates school and doesn't want to be there. If I can win that kid over, then to me, the whole year, yes, I care about all the other kids as well. But like, if you can get someone to love learning and to see themselves as what they could be instead of what they thought they could be, to me, that's all the difference. So I don't really care about test scores. I know I should, but I don't ever. Actually, I hate testing. To me, it's about those kids that you reach. And I always have told my students, no matter what age I teach, by the time when you graduate high school, if you still want to be friends with me, you can look me up on Facebook and I can be friends with you then, but not until then. And the amount of students who have done that I love it. Like, and some of them do it like literally like the day they graduate. And I'm like, oh, it's so cool now to see some of them. I mean, some of them, I'm totally aging myself, but some of them are quite well accomplished adults now. And to have watched them grow and get married and have children and pursue their careers and travel the world. And I've a couple that like are huge musicians and doing cool stuff or doing things that they would have never, like, it's just amazing to watch them grow. And so it's that longevity. And like, it's, my old head of school, I just forgot his name and it'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, he used to say, what is the transportable gift you can give students when they leave our school? And to me, that's the win always.
And do you have this concept of potentially reaching the kid who has potential, maybe doesn't want to learn, doesn't want to be there, trying to reach that student, while still obviously making sure all the other kids are having a great experience, et cetera. But like, do you have a proudest moment or a favorite experience or any student that pops into your mind where over the course of the year you kind of got there and it felt really good? You don't have to share names, right? Maybe but like, do you have any favorite stories or proudest moments along those lines of any students you were able to reach, and how'd you get there? What did it take? Did it take gaming with them? Like, what did it take?
No. So, okay. First of all, that head of school who told me the transportable gift thing, his name's Bill Garrett. And so he would know the student because he placed the student in my classroom. And the student did not see them, I think had given up on school. And that student, their parent was well known at our school. And so I think they felt this undue pressure to have to do well. And so they purposely chose not to. And I think the student was really struggling. And anyway, long story short, it took a long time, and I was able to somehow, and I don't know exactly what I did that worked, but that student like was not going to do the IB. The student did not see themselves as an academic, did not see themselves as just caring about learning at all. And at the end of the year, the student had excelled in my classroom, had done incredibly well. The parent was really somewhat teary-eyed about the impact that year had on the student. But when I left the school, the student got up and did my going away speech. And did a whole rap poem about me, and it was a poem, and it was so good. And he said he had actually written part of it when he was a student in my classroom, and so I actually still watch his accomplishments now, and I'm just so excited because I think he was on a path mentally that he easily could have ended up not being who he is now. And I think somehow I had a little bit of impact on that. And I loved, he might be one of my favorites.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And again, everybody probably has a lot of different possibilities of where their life could lead. And the more that there's a little bit shift over into the more positive direction, the better off we all are. A couple more quick hitter questions as we wrap up. But first, a quick plug. You mentioned George Bailey and the movie It's a Wonderful Life. I had never seen that movie until maybe 2 years ago. I don't know how that happened, but I had never seen it before. And so, I mean, I saw it later in life. I didn't see it as 10 or 9 or 15. But my gosh, like, huge recommendation. If you haven't seen that movie, gosh, watch it. If you saw it a long time ago, go rewatch it. Make sure you're present for it. Like, that's a very powerful movie. Like, I was tearing up at the end. Like, that's a fantastic movie. Side note, side plug, great movie. All right, quick hitter questions. What is the number one piece of advice when there's a new teacher starting Maybe it's their first time teaching internationally, or maybe it's their first time teaching ever. What's the number one piece of advice that you might give to that teacher? Or when you see those teachers who are in that first year, what's the number one piece of advice you end up giving because it's just so consistent? So what would you share with anyone who maybe, it's early September, there's some teachers right now who are starting their first year. What's the number one piece of advice that you give?
I would say, if you can, sit in other people's classes. So I lucked out and I had a teacher who would let me sit. We were sharing a classroom and I would sit in the back of the class and I would put headphones in, but I never actually turned them on. And I listened and watched how other people taught. It taught me so much. You only know what you know. When you see all these other people teaching the same subject that you're teaching, you learn so much and you grow so much as a teacher. Get into as many classrooms as you can, however you can.
Yeah. Watch, observe, take notes. And as usual, if you see something that you like that another teacher's doing, potentially go try it yourself. You might have to put your little flavor on it based on your personality, but potentially go try it yourself. What to you is the single best thing about this profession, education?
The students, just helping them fall in love with something that they didn't even know existed before and potentially impacting their life.
And the single toughest or hardest thing about this profession, or if you had a magic wand and could change one thing overnight, what would you change?
Losing a student. That's the hardest.
And cell phones in classroom, yes or no?
I think, I am a tech guru and I am an ed tech all the way, but I'm starting to think, no, keep them out.
Yep. AI in the classroom. One quick one on this, just because you mentioned it earlier in some of the professional development learnings that are out there. Is there a single one best use case that you see where AI can be used to aid students in the learning process? Is there anything you've seen so far where this can be beneficial as opposed to viewed as cheating or no longer thinking? Like, is there one example you've seen where this is actually beneficial for students in the classroom?
I think you can use it as a thought partner, and teaching students to use it as a thought partner and to help them think through different ways to get something done. They can become so overwhelmed. And if you, instead of being overwhelmed by a project or something and they don't know where to start, using AI as a thought partner to help them get started, take it. I use it every day.
Perfect. Any educators out there who you admire, who you want to give a quick shout out to? There's always people talk about, appreciate your teachers. Let's do it. Who do you appreciate and why?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I'm gonna not do good justice here, but one that comes to mind that is a teacher who I learn from all the time is Darnell Fine. He is one of the finest teachers that I've ever been in front of, and I value him all the time. Oh my gosh, we have like over 200 in our platform and I love all of them because I pre-screen them. So if I love them, they become on our platform and we work with them. So I think that just anyone who's out there who is vulnerable and trying to learn and to do new things, I think that, I don't know, it's hard to name. Just a couple.
Perfect. And two more very quick ones. ISS and your Netflix style learning so that educators can go get the training help they needed when they need it. Where can they find out more? Where do they go? How do they sign up? Where would you point people who say, I want to learn more about this?
Sure. They would just go to our website, iss.edu, and then look up the EDU Learn or our professional development. And we have over 200 courses. We translate them into 232 languages. And the list is growing every day. Like I said, we just ran one this morning. So we have them all the time. And we'd love to work with more people and figure out what schools need.
Perfect. And as we wrap up here, last question, any new words of wisdom, something that we just didn't have a chance to cover that you'd like to share with teaching or prospective teachers listening out there, or anything that you said, but it's so important, you just want to say it one more time and make sure we don't forget. So any new or repeated final words of wisdom?
And I would say that I say often that teaching internationally is I would consider it the best kept secret in education. You will grow so much professionally, and you have opportunities to travel the world and to learn with some of the most amazing educators I've ever met in my life. It was the best career move I ever made, and I wish more people knew about it.
And real quick on that note, I can't let that go. When did you make the leap to teach internationally? Where were you? Like, how many years have you been teaching? Maybe, what year, what age, anything you'd like to share? Where were you when you took your first leap?
When I first thought about teaching overseas, the only thing I knew of was the Peace Corps. And I actually signed up for the Peace Corps, but then I got into grad school and I didn't go. Then I signed up to teach overseas. And my husband at the time proposed to me, so I ended up getting married. I wish I had started younger in my life. I didn't do it until in the 2000s. And so I think I was in my mid-30s. I wish I had done it earlier. I was in Bangkok. I had moved overseas for my husband's job. He was with the U.S. Embassy, and I started teaching. That's when I went from higher ed to teaching in a K-12 school, and absolutely loved it, and spent 20 years in the international schools, and now working with international schools here stateside, only because our headquarters is stateside, but I'm working with international schools every day, and I loved it. I wish I had known about it earlier in my career.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dana Watts. Definitely some very real great stories from a real educator, spanning from college to middle school to how the heck do I deal with 13-year-olds after I've dealt with 19-year-olds, to incredible stories that happen in the classroom when you're teaching internationally, like having World War II survivors of bombed cities be able to talk to the class. Unbelievable. And sharing some words of wisdom that folks hopefully listening can potentially go put into practice even in this school year, like how to think about success at the end of the year, and maybe how to engage the parents in their favorite work of literature, song, poem, whatever it may be. So thank you so much for sharing and giving some people here listening some actionable, useful, fun, authentic things that they might be able to apply for their school year this year. Thanks so much, Dana.
Okay, thank you.